Okay. Make sure she can.
We can just do some karaoke or something. Oh, karaoke. See if who's
I think it's working.
yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. We're in.
Weird.
Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. My name is Leah Frieden, and I'm the Assistant Manager of the Adult and Reference Department here at the Fayetteville Public Library. And I just want to start by saying thank you all so much for joining us today. And welcome to those watching through live stream as well. This event is presented by the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition and the League of Women Voters, so many thanks to them. As you leave today, please take a moment to share your feedback. We'll have forms in the lobby following the program. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to our moderator, DeQuisha Prude-Wheeler. Thank you very much, DeQuisha.
Good evening, everyone. My name is DeQuisha Prude-Wheeler, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Thank you to the Fayetteville Public Library for allowing us to host this event here. thank you to the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition and the League of Women Voters for putting this together for us. And lastly, thank you all, the candidates, the viewers, and attendees for being here with us tonight. Joining us today, we have the Washington County leadership candidates, Josh Moody and Charles Ward. Each candidate tonight will have 3 minutes to provide an opening statement. Following opening statements, each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer 4 to 5 pre-prepared questions, followed by questions from the audience. We ask that the audience will write your questions on the cards that you have and pass them to the attendees in the aisle. When you see the yellow cards, that means you have 1 minute remaining. Once you see a red card, that means your time is up, and we ask that you finish your sentence and wrap your answer up at that point. If we have no further questions, we'll go ahead and start. Question number 1. What are the biggest concerns or issues facing Washington County? And we'll start with Charles. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We'll start with Charles for the opening statement.
Okay, my name is Charles Ward, and I'm running to be your county judge. I'd like to start with thanking everyone for getting involved and being here tonight. A little about me to start off. I am a Christian, and I lead my life by those values. I was a Boy Scout. I graduated from Elkins High School, and my first job was working on the farm, but formally it was McDonald's. After graduating high school, I went in the United States Navy as a CB. We spent 8 years doing that. Me and my wife and my daughter made the decision to go ahead and come home to Northwest Arkansas. We moved back to the farm, and then soon after bought a house in Elkins. I started working for the county as an operator. During that time, the 15 years that I served Washington County, I'd done everything from being a janitor to being an operator to being a supervisor, and then finally being the road superintendent. I did decide to go ahead and separate myself from Washington County to start my own business. And Washington County is growing with people from all over the world, and we've got to be able to change to deal with the growth. As more people come in, we're dealt with homelessness, crime, and poverty, and that's why we're here tonight.
Next, we'll have Mr. Josh Moody. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Quisha, for moderating. Thank you to the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition, as well as the League of Women Voters of Washington County for co-hosting this. And thank you to Fayetteville Public Library for being the physical host of this event. I really appreciate everybody involved in making this happen. Thank you to all of you for showing up. Thank you to those listening at home. Thank you to my wife, who's taken on a second full-time job as campaign manager for me. Thank you to my mother, who's come out of retirement to be a super volunteer for the campaign, and thank you to all the other volunteers who have helped so far. I'm Josh Moody. Speaking of my parents, I grew up, my parents were both educators, so of course, as a teenager, I decided I'm definitely not going to be an educator, I'm going to go into business. And I went to business college, and I majored in human resource management and minored in psychology, which I guess, looking back on it, means I want to help people work. It means I want to help people work by finding employment, being employed, and I also want to help people work through life's daily struggles. So that's my focus. I was in the business world for a few years in human resources, as well as a nonprofit executive for a local organization, local branch of a national organization, and finally decided, you know what, I guess I'll teach. So I've been teaching for the past 14 years. Most of that time was spent, 8 years was spent at the Juvenile Detention Center in South Fayetteville, Washington County JDC. And though I was teaching for the Fayetteville Public Schools in that time, and still am, I was very close to the county department, and over the years realized how the county government is working for us and how it's not working so much. And it seems like in the recent years, it's working less and less in many ways. Administration seems to be absentee, The Quorum Court seems to be very divided, and which is leading to some dysfunction. County government should be nonpartisan. There's no such thing as a Democrat way of road grading, to borrow from somebody I spoke with last week. There's no such thing as a Republican way to maintain the roads, right? It's nonpartisan. And I would like to come together. I'm running on purple. I'm running on bringing red and blue together for common ground and compromise, because we are all neighbors. The fact of the matter is we are all in this together. And over the past 14 years, I've dedicated my life to public service. I've been advocating for employees and as well as residents of Washington County for years now. This is my next natural step to not only continue to advocate for people, but actually be in the room and be able to help make decisions that will help improve all of our quality of life. The population's growing, as we all know. That's a good problem to have. It comes with pluses and minuses. There's a lot of preparation that we need to do on the front end to prepare for that. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mr. Moody, for the first question. What are the biggest concerns or issues facing Washington County?
I think I did jump on a couple of those a little bit already, but so biggest issues, population growth. As the population is growing, county roads need to be well maintained and taken care of and improved. My kids actually live on a county road, so they're as important to me as anybody. The roads department has been dysfunctional for a few years now. The staffing is low. The morale is low. The retention is low. The turnover is high. Burnout is high, which also means overtime is high. So one of the things that we need to do in order to better serve all county members is to go in there and work with all the roads department employees to see what we can do to actually improve morale and improve retention. I know there's a salary schedule that passed recently, and it's my understanding that may or may not be the most popular thing with the actual employees of the roads departments, based on my conversations with them. And leadership has been lacking in that department for some time now. Population growth. A big conversation here in Washington County is, well, if the population's growing, we're going to have to expand the jail. And if we continue to do things the way we have been, you're absolutely right, we will. At the same time, if we choose to do other things to alleviate some of the overcrowding at the jail, then I don't think that will prove to be necessary. I am the only candidate who is advocating to use COVID relief funds to expand drug court, expand veterans court and veteran services, implement a mental health court, which is a thing. It does exist, and it's actually doing pretty well over in Jonesboro if you just want to take a pretty close look somewhere near us. And also, homelessness has become an issue in recent years, especially with the pandemic. It was before, but it's even more so now. The easiest way to solve homelessness is to house people. Maybe that's oversimplifying, but at the same time, we have the means and resources to do that right now. We have a golden opportunity right now that would help those people that are suffering, especially in South Fayetteville, what I've seen most, and as well as around the county to a smaller extent. There are organizations that are doing the good work of taking steps toward that, but if we had a county government that would actually take larger steps and partner with these organizations, these churches, and coordinate the effort, we would actually be able to put a larger dent in it and let's be proactive, let's be rehabilitative, let's be healing, let's be helpful to our neighbors. Thank you.
Mr. Ward, same question for you. What are the biggest concerns or issues facing Washington County?
Wow, that's hard to, Josh hit on most of them. Population is probably the biggest thing. The people are coming in, the people are overcrowding the cities. The cities are at their limits, and they're starting to take in rural areas. Well, we're building subdivisions in the county, and we don't have roads enough to support those subdivisions. And when we're talking about homelessness, a lot of these homeless people are coming from in the county. They're coming inside of the city to try to gain help and get help, and that's where those resources are at for those people. And I agree with a lot of what Josh just said about that. And with the mental health issues, which is definitely an issue, we need to start getting our people aligned to where they're qualified to deal with these kind of people. When an officer goes out and arrests a mentally ill person, they have to make a decision if this person is mentally ill, or are they just doing this out of meanness? Do they need to go to jail, or do they need to go to the facility to where they can be cared for? And we're asking an awful lot of those officers to make that decision. And that's the reason why these people end up in jail to begin with. We've got a lot of good programs out there, and I think the problem with these programs are we don't have qualified people to keep the programs operating. We've got to get people interested and to wanting to step up to operate these programs to make them successful.
Thank you. Mr. Ward, I'll pose this second question to you first.
Okay.
What will you do in your first 90 days in office to address the issues that you stated?
In the first 90 days, what my intentions were was to sit down with every elected official. This isn't just a county judge problem, this is every elected official's problem. And we've all got to work together in order to make anything possible. So my intentions were to sit down and have a conference with each one of these elected officials and find out what their perspective is and see if my perspective aligns with theirs, and maybe we can all work together to get these things straightened out.
Thank you. Same question for you, Mr. Moody. What will you do in your first 90 days in office to address the issues that you stated?
I truly believe that my election would be a mandate by the voters of Washington County to make the Quorum Court work together. As I mentioned earlier, I'm running on purple, bringing red and blue together for common ground and compromise. Though I am running as a Democrat, county government should be nonpartisan. We are neighbors. So that would definitely be one thing. I'd work with the Quorum Court both on a large-scale level as well as an individual level, and try to understand the motivations and the passions and the backgrounds of each individual. Now, of course, the county judge does preside over the Quorum Court, but that's one of just many things. The county judge also oversees 16 total departments within the county. Whoever wins, out of anybody that is sitting up here or who has a name tag up here, they'll be new to the job. It'll be on-the-job training for sure. Our current county judge will no longer be in office. So, I think true leadership means going into each of those departments and not saying this is what you're doing wrong and this is what you should do better. It's saying, how can I help you succeed? What are the barriers keeping you from succeeding within your department? What are the problems you're having with the staff or whatever? Talking to the department head, but also with the employees within there, because I did mention the roads department, but I'm fully aware that the Juvenile Detention Center has had staffing issues over the years. The county jail has had issues over the years. That's really under the sheriff's purview, but as county judge, I would be the custodian of the building and would have some say-so of what's going on within the building. So again, making sure that we all the elected officials recognize that first and foremost, public service should be our focus. Not personal agendas, not political points, not splashy headlines, but public service. And when I go into the departments and ask what are the issues holding you back, going back to my team, discussing with all department heads as a whole and coordinating efforts, and right, more heads are better than one, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm getting a little rambly, but also transparency. I will definitely have an open door policy. I will definitely be inviting any member of the public into my office whenever it's convenient for the two of us to meet. I will be out in the community and county quite a bit and be available for, I'm thinking about coffee times or office hours or whatever outside in the county. Being transparent, no closed door deals. I'll stop there.
We'll start with you, Mr. Ward, for the next question. How will you represent people across the landscape of Washington County with differing viewpoints and ways of life? For example, rural versus urban areas of the county with varying needs.
What we all need to remember is that all these cities, all these urban areas are also Washington County. And I think we've lost sight of that over the last years. And I tend to look at the rural areas because that's where I came from. But we've got to remember that these cities, as they grow, are also a county problem. And we've got to be able to lead all of these people and be there for all of these people, irregardless of what their position is or what they do.
Same question for you, Mr. Moody. How will you represent people across the landscape of Washington County with differing viewpoints and ways of life? For example, rural versus urban areas of the county with varying needs.
Right. Well, I like what Mr. Ward said about the people in the cities are part of the county as well. That's absolutely true. We are all Washington County. I was actually born, I first lived in Lincoln, Arkansas, where my parents, they were working at the Lincoln High School, and that's where they met, so I eventually came along. My kids live out in Cincinnati. My daughter, actually, she's a Lincoln Riding Club regulator for the Lincoln Rodeo and has sung the national anthem there more than once, which, as my wife can attest, has made me tear up just about every time. So I'm out in the county. I show up. I will show up. I've been showing up these last few months. I've been showing up these last few years, from Brentwood to Winslow to Durham to Elkins to Goshen to Blue Mountain Road, probably 10 miles south of Prairie Grove. I've been showing up. I've been crossing the divide already. Though I'm running as a Democrat, I will not be a Democrat county judge. I vow that now. I will be a Washington County judge. I've actually already talked to people who typically would not vote for Democrats, some self-described hardcore Republicans even. But after a 15-minute conversation, they come up to me and say, I thought you were a liberal hippie, but I want a yard sign, I want to pass out cards for you, I want to volunteer for you, I'm going to vote for you. That's what's happening. That's what happens when we have conversations with each other. Though I consider myself a pragmatic progressive, I've had multiple conversations with conservative friends even years before this. And I've recognized that the longer we talk and listen to each other, the more we agree on. Over the last several years, on all levels of government, from local to national, we've decided and chosen to argue on the things that we disagree on. And who's better for it? None of us. We have so much in common. The vast majority of us agree on most things. Most of us are somewhere in the middle, whether we lean left or right, blue or red, whatever the case may be. Most of us are somewhere on the purple spectrum. So I will continue to have those conversations. In fact, after I finish my semester this school year, I will be committing the rest of this year to reaching out to every corner, even places I haven't been yet, and talking to people and reaching out and making myself available. 479-422-1818 is my cell phone number. Please feel free to call me anytime. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 18 is the voting age, so remember that. That's my little teacher hack. I am here for all of you. I have been here for all of you, and I will continue to do that, whether it's serving as county judge or just being Josh Moody still. Either way, I'm working for you. Thank you.
Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Moody. There are varying offices that report to the county judge. If elected, how will you manage the different departments and their budgets?
Well, kind of going back to the on-the-job training, I would definitely be learning in those first few months about what the budgets look like, why are they that way, where could we be more efficient, where do we need to expand a little bit. And I think that's true of any governmental unit. One thing that I definitely think we need to expand again that's contracted in recent years is the Environmental Affairs Office. I'm trying to stay focused on the question at hand. Sorry, I was going to go down a tangent. But working with those people and seeing what they need. And we have some department heads here tonight. So being open-minded, being as a lifelong learner, I'm always here to figure out. I mean, throughout these months, I've been learning pretty much on a daily basis, not only how to campaign, but what all entails the job itself. It's all about building relationships. It's all about reaching out to people. It's all about listening to people. Whether you're campaigning or on the job, it's all about having open-minded and transparent conversations with people, figuring out how you can be of service. I think I'll leave that at that.
Same question for you, Mr. Ward. There are varying offices that report to the county judge. If elected, how will you manage the different departments and their budgets?
Each one of those departments have a department head that has managed their budgets over the years. And the county judge typically, or during the time that I've served Washington County, has accepted those budgets, looked them over, took them back to the department head and said, hey, look, I want you to cut 10% off of that. Well, I don't agree with that. However, I was a part of that. What we really need to do is look at each one of those department heads and say, what is your actual needs? What do you need to operate? And let them tell you. From year to year, that budget should change drastically, because from one year, you're not going to need as much money as you had the year before because you've got a plan. Now, our population's going up, we said that before, and that brings in more taxes. And that's good, but also with those people coming in, it costs more money to maintain. So the more people you've got, you would think that your budgets would go up instead of going down. But as we've seen over the years, it's cut 10% of your budget. So you cut 10% of your budget, you get so far into the year, and then you come back, you have to ask for more money because you've cut yourself beyond what you can operate with. But the bottom line is those individuals running those departments know what they're doing. They've been doing what they're doing. And our job as county judge is to help them be successful.
Next question, we'll start with Mr. Ward. Employee retention and hiring has been a challenge for Washington County. What is the role of the county judge in this area?
Okay, the county judge has the departments, and the department heads typically advertise and do the interviewing. The county judge, signs off on those when that department head says that he's going to hire or fire, or however that's going to go. That evaluation's made, and then that action happens. With retention in mind, most people, especially the road department, come to the county. They're either at the end of their career or at the beginning of their career. So you're either in a training phase trying to get these guys up to par, or they're trying to slow down. They've been in the market, they've made their money. Now they just want to give back to the community. We've got to relate to those people in order to be able to get them to stay and be long-term employees. With each other department, we have the same issues. Juvenile Detention Center, the biggest issue I see with the Juvenile Detention Center is they don't have enough employees and they still have to staff it. So those people have to work all the hours. You can't not staff it, and they get burned out. And We don't see that as much in any of the other departments. I'm sure they see it in the jail constantly. But the juvenile detention center is definitely something that we've got to get people involved and get the right people interested in serving the juvenile detention center. Thank you.
Mr. Moody, same question for you. Employee retention and hiring has been a challenge in Washington County. What is the role of the county judge in this area?
As most of us know, it's cheaper to retain people than it is to pay overtime, recruit, train, and onboard new employees. So I think that the current administration has been talking to the department heads and asking, what do I need to do? I'm a teacher with a business background, as I mentioned before. I've also operated a forklift. I wasn't quite old enough to do so, but I think that was more on the employer than myself. Plus, we're past the statute of limitations. I've unloaded trucks at 4 a.m. before class in college. I've worked offshore on oil rigs as a summer job through college. And as I bragged to my kids, I say, you know, I hate to brag, but I drove professionally for 4 years, which basically just meant I was a delivery driver at different times in my life. Anyway, so I've worked a lot of different jobs. I don't just want to talk to the department heads. I want to talk to the people on the ground, the people on the floor of the JDC, as mentioned, the guys working, the people working at the roads department. Mr. Ward brought it up, and I would just like to emphasize that JDC, fully staffed means 19 employees. Best case scenario, you have 3 people on each shift. So that's 3 shifts a day. That's 9 shifts, basically 9 people a day. There was a time when we had 6. That's it, 6. The Juvenile Detention Center shut down a couple of times last year due to staffing issues. The first time it was sold as a maintenance thing, but really it's because we didn't have the people to work. That's a problem. And so not only does that mean that these kids who have potentially already been traumatized by being incarcerated, they're going to be rehoused in another county facility, Benton County or another facility, and then moved back and forth for a couple of weeks. And then, of course, that's costing the county money also, in addition to the traumatization. So let's talk to the people that are on the ground, not just department heads. Let's be with all employees. Last summer, while being distracted with an irrelevant to the county resolution, splashy resolution made by the Quorum Court, they also decided to give all the highest paid elected officials a significant pay raise. Meanwhile, telling the people that are on the bottom, the people that make less than $15 an hour, wait your turn. We'll get to you. Don't you worry. I promise. What kind of message does that send to those people? The wheels on the bus go round and round because the wheels themselves, not just the steering wheel.
Right.
So it takes every employee to be a part of that. It takes all the cogs to make the wheels turn. And making sure that all of our employees are important to us, what they're doing is important, and we value their service and their families is important. Thank you.
We'll now move on to the audience questions. Again, you'll have 3 minutes to answer these as well. We'll start first with you, Mr. Moody. What is your position on county jail expansion? If you support this, why? If you're opposed, what alternatives do you support and why?
To my knowledge, I'm the only candidate that is publicly advocating to use COVID relief funds to expand drug court, which the drug court judge has been asking for years, to expand veteran services and veterans court, to expand or to implement the mental health court that I spoke of, to work on homelessness, rather than using COVID relief money for jail expansion. Over the last several months, the majority of the Quorum Court has been working towards expanding the jail using American Rescue funds, which are explicitly stated as not an eligible use of those funds. In 2018, the sheriff was asking to expand the jail, and the Quorum Court voted it down Democrats because for humanitarian concerns, Republicans because they didn't want to raise taxes, right? We funded in 2019 funded a study by the National Center for State Courts saying, please help us with our jail overcrowding situation. Paid them $60,000 to do it. They took a year to research and publish the findings. About 10 to 12 findings overall and suggestions. Out of those 10 to 12, we've implemented one, which is the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. And there are many people that work on that, the prosecutor, the public defenders, several of the circuit judges, some nonprofits, some social workers, a lot of good people trying to work on things. Of course, they all have their full-time job too. It's fortunate that we finally do have a full-time coordinator for that role who does work under the county judge. And then the American Rescue Funds came, COVID came, and we said, here's our chance. Let's use this free money and let's expand the jail. That's a gamble. That's a very risky gamble that the Quorum Court is looking at. Basically what they're saying is we're going to go ahead and use this money to expand the jail, and the feds are just going to deal with it and they're not going to do anything about it. It's my understanding that a couple of weeks ago the feds actually reached out and said, no, not so fast. I don't think if we implemented all the suggestions by the National Center for State Courts in that research findings, I don't think the jail expansion will be necessary. At the JDC, we were busting at the seams in 2016, and I helped create a diversion program, among others, that actually brought recidivism rates down in the JDC, dealing with the same population growth that the rest of Washington County and Northwest Arkansas is dealing with. And now we have 10 to 12 kids on average rather than 40. I'm not just talking about justice reform. I've seen it, I've done it, I know it works. I know that it can work. I would love to keep going, but I'm being told to stop, so thank you.
Mr. Ward, same question for you. What is your position on county jail expansion? If you support it, why? If you're opposed, what alternatives do you support and why?
I don't think we have any choice but to expand the jail. And the reason why I say that is because with population growth, like we said earlier, there is going to be issues where you're going to have the room. However, there are programs that we can put into place, and that's something that we will have to evaluate and get started. And all of these things are going to take a lot of time. If we decide today that we're going to build that jail and we do have the funds to do it with, it'll take 5 years before that jail is built to where you could even put anybody in it. Where are we going to be in 5 years? Now, using COVID relief money to build the jail is not the correct way to do this. Now, nobody wants to pay more taxes, but we all want to be safe. We all want the police officers running up and down the road. We all want to feel that security. Well, the capacity of the jail, that's what the jail's there for. Now, we've got to figure out how to get people out. Once they get in jail, let's figure out how we can get those people situated where they can get out of jail and stay out of jail instead of continuing to come back to jail for the same reasons. Thank you.
Mr. Ward, we'll start with you for the next one. If you become our county judge, would you release our COVID federal money to help residents with help they may need to recover from the effects of COVID on their lives?
That's a hard question. Yes, I believe that that's what that money is there for. But as Josh stated earlier, that money may be better positioned to establish a plan to save us further down the road than just right now. Thank you.
Same question for you, Mr. Moody. If you become our county judge, would you release our COVID federal money to help residents with help they may need to recover from the effects of COVID on their lives?
That's a hard question. Yes, I believe that that's what that money is there for. But as Josh stated earlier, that money may be better positioned to establish a plan to save us further down the road than just right now. Thank you.
Same question for you, Mr. Moody. If you become our county judge, would you release our COVID federal money to help residents with help they may need to recover from the effects of COVID on their lives?
Absolutely. Before American Rescue, there were $4.5 million given through the CARES Act to the county. And we used about $1.1 million for various items. And then put away $3.4 million for a rainy day. Never mind the fact that it's been raining on people for a couple of years now throughout the county. Now, while we had that hoard of general reserves, the current administration allowed the Crisis Stabilization Unit to close last year. It was a pilot program started in 2019, and the state was going to give so much money for 2 years to keep it going, to see how it works. And they decided we're going to stop. Basically, the transition outside of that pilot program was a $43,000 cut in funding from the state to the county. And rather than use that CARES money to keep the Crisis Stabilization Unit open, the administration basically hoped to quietly just let it close. Didn't work. A lot of people knew. A lot of people were aware. And as we all know, it's a lot easier to keep something going rather than it is to shut it down and then try to reopen it later. Fortunately, UAMS stepped up and said, we'll get it back going again. And that was back at the beginning of the year, 6 months into it. Now, at best case scenario, the CSU will be closed for a solid year before it reopens. How many people could have been served in that time? How many people needed those services in that time that did not get it because it was not available to them because of mismanagement of funds by the county administration? American Rescue funds are eligible to be used for the things that I've mentioned multiple times, the courts and services. That is an eligible use. That CARES money, there were JPs that were trying to use that CARES money to keep people housed, to keep small businesses going, and that kept being shut down. Most recently, there was an emergency rental assistance kerfuffle, as a euphemism for better words. In which case, the county told certain tenants within our county that you will have March, April, and May rent taken care of. And people used that and said, okay, great, we have that. We know that rent's taken care of. What else do we need to spend our money on? Because not everybody gets to just, buy things as it comes. Okay, we can either buy food, we can either keep the lights on, we can either pay for our medicine. That's a decision that a lot of people in our county have to make on a regular basis, that those in charge, those in power don't seem to understand some of the times. Or if they do, they don't seem to care. Fortunately, some of the money did come in. I, among others, suggested that we could use that CARES money to bridge the gap until the Fed money gets here, and that was shut down. That's my time. Sorry. I keep going on that too, but I won't. Thank you.
We'll start with you, Mr. Moody, for the second one. How will you balance the need for red dirt and dirt pits expanding in neighborhoods?
This is perfect timing. I learned more about this last week at the Democratic Women's Meeting. And I was aware of some controversy over the years with dirt mines, more west, I guess, kind of mid to the western part of the county, out Weddington Woods and beyond. And it's my understanding that 888 homes are currently being affected by these 5 different dirt mine companies or organizations. And it's not only their homes, their physical homes, their drinking water is being affected. The streams downstream from these developments are being affected, which means ecology and wildlife and all that kind of thing can mess up fishing and floating and those kind of activities that some of us enjoy. And it's also my understanding that some of these businesses are operating without a permit currently. And I guess that nobody is trying to dissuade that. So they are without a permit currently and still operating, running trucks up and down county roads, creating more damage to those roads to where those neighborhoods are trying to get in and out from whatever they need to do. So it's a specific issue, but it's also a very general issue. I think I would have a good conversation with the Department of Environmental Quality, the ADEC. I would also have a good conversation with the incoming sheriff, who I think would be open to listening and saying, is it possible that we can enforce this a little bit better? Is it possible we can be down there a little bit more? Driving around the county, you'll sometimes see a deputy hanging out, and maybe during each shift, at one point on each shift, maybe they can go down there and check it out and see what's going on. Now, I'm not suggesting we haul those people off to jail, because I already mentioned I don't think that we need to incarcerate everybody that is currently incarcerated. Only violent offenders that truly pose a danger to us, to our community. But I think fines and fees and some things like that might be, and just simply putting barriers in front of those entryways into those mines might be good first stops just off the top of my head. I think those might be worth pursuing further, so I'd be excited to explore that more.
Mr. Ward, same question for you. How will you balance the need for red dirt and dirt pits expanding in neighborhoods?
Okay, first of all, a red dirt pit should not be established in a neighborhood that has already got housing there. Now, with that also being said, there's only certain regions in our area that actually have red dirt. You know, the further south you go, you got a shale product, or you're in the creek using creek gravel. We've got to have this material to build infrastructure. It just has to be. However, that's the reason why we have planning departments and things like that, and we've got to work better at enforcing these things. Whenever they come through and it's obvious, hey, you know what, you've got mineral rights. You do have mineral rights to your property. However, this is a bad place to do it. You know, maybe you should have looked at that before you purchased the property, if that's what your intentions were. Now, there are places where these dirt mines are that are inappropriate places. It's not necessarily affecting that many people. However, we've got to enforce it. You know, ADEQ, the time that I've dealt with ADEQ, they react instead of being proactive. And I think the reason for that is they have staffing issues like the rest of us. If there's a complaint made, ADEQ will show up and investigate it. If the water quality is showing to be bad or something's wrong downstream from these mines, there are people you can call and they will go investigate that. But we come down to enforcement. These people are operating these mines, and it's like, okay, you're going to fine me, we'll just say it's $15,000. Well, $15,000 to somebody that's running a mine is not very much money. I mean, it's just really not. And I'm not saying we should run around and just fine everybody, because these people are trying to make a living and they're trying to provide a product that we all need. But there definitely needs to be more enforcement and more control over the quality of their developments. Thank you.
Climate change experts predict more catastrophic weather events. How would you approach preparing the county? We'll start with you, Mr. Ward.
Well, the catastrophic events happen all the time. You know, we had an ice storm. I was at the county when we had that ice storm. During that time, we had enough money and we were able to clean that mess up ourselves without having a subcontract, and that was amazing. And there was several contractors pitched in and helped, you know, and not to mention the landowners that got out with their tractors and everything like that. But the fact of the matter is, we have tornadoes in this region, we have ice storms, we have flooding probably more than anything, seems like, here lately. There has to be a certain amount of money allocated specifically for a disaster. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, the road department has had an unappropriated reserve the whole time I was there. And the question was raised, does that unappropriated reserve need to stay with the road department, or should it be in the general fund? Well, there's certain monies that are brought to the road department that can only be used in the road department. So that's one reason. But maybe we need to relook at that and use those funds if everybody's interested in pulling money out of the general unappropriated reserve when we do have these tragedies. there's definitely a balance there that we've got to look at and manage. Thank you.
Mr. Moody, same question for you. Climate change experts predict more catastrophic weather events. How would you approach preparing the county?
Mr. Ward already mentioned emergency management, which is a department we'd oversee. Actually, it's a department I haven't heard any complaints on, which I guess is a good thing. So as far as I know, we're running pretty well. And so I'd like to definitely support them in any way we can. It's obviously important to be reactive to situations. I mean, we were all aware of the tornado that came through last month, and I guess it's been a month now, which is pretty devastating. And it is my understanding what I heard, not when I was up there, but like immediately after it happened, County Emergency Management was up there, boots on the ground, taking care of business, taking care of people, cleaning things up, which is awesome. It's great to hear. That's a shining star on the county government's part. But let's not just be reactive, let's be proactive. Again, we're all in this together. Climate resilience, climate change resistance is going to have to start at the local level, because as we've seen on the national level, it's very difficult to get things going too smoothly on a bipartisan level. To my knowledge, I'm the only candidate that has spoken out about environmental policy. One of the things I intend to do in my first term is reduce all single-use plastic usage within county departments by 90%. That's a concrete, measurable goal. I also intend to partner with Illinois River Watershed Partnership, Beaver Water Alliance, some of these other organizations working to fortify streams in the county. When we have these flooding issues, we have a lot of runoff because there's so much impervious surfaces we have, which is causing issues, and it's clogging up things downriver, which is why the Illinois River Watershed Partnership exists to begin with, because we were polluting Oklahoma's end of the Illinois. Fortify streams. Invite and incentivize green tech, energy, and other types of green technology companies to set up shop right here in Washington County. Canoe is a eco-friendly car maker that's coming here, as well as Benton County, but they're going to set up partly in Washington County in Fayetteville. That's a great start. Some people that know a whole lot better about corporations than I do are saying that the next 1,000, highly successful multi-billion-dollar companies are going to be green tech companies. Green agriculture, green steel, green cement, green. That's the future. Let's not just wait for other people to do it. Let's take advantage of that and do it ourselves. Let's reap the rewards of being a pioneer in that. I think it would improve all of our quality of life. Thank you.
We'll start with you, Mr. Moody, for the next question. Please describe your leadership and management style when working with representatives in the Quorum Court and citizens of Washington County.
Listen. Try to understand. Try to empathize. Try to relate. The vast majority of people on the Quorum Court, I believe, are trying to do what's right by their constituents. I do believe that. I think that some of them might be misinformed or might not be aware of the plight of other people in the county. I would encourage those people to go out into their districts, not just their neighborhood, not just their social circles, not just their workplaces, but actually go to other parts of the district where people might have a different situation than they do, and understanding that. A lot of the kids at JDC were there, not because, first of all, I've worked with kids that have done terrible things, but I've never met a bad kid. And some of those kids are led astray at a young age because there's nothing to do after school. And mom or dad, or let's say mom, single mom with 5 kids is having to work 3 jobs to keep food on the table and roof over the head. Don't even have time to supervise their children, things like that. Let's be aware of all that. I think I'm going off track here. You're asking about leadership. Empathy. Not this is what you're going to do, but how can I help you? Leadership is all about accepting the blame and sharing the credit. And I think any true leader would agree with that. And I'm a team player. I step up when I need to, but I'm happy to sit back in the background when somebody else is better suited to take something on. I'm happy to do that. I'm a team player. I actually used to coach earlier in my career, so I'm all about teamwork. Thanks.
Mr. Ward, same question to you. Please describe your leadership and management style when working with representatives in the Quorum Court and citizens of Washington County.
Okay, in the Quorum Court, one thing we've got to remember that I think a lot of people forget is the Quorum Court member is a part-time position. They've got full-time jobs. They're out there working, and they're spending their time facilitating that position. So getting the information that you intend for them to vote on early enough that they've actually got time to evaluate what they're going to be voting on. Get them all of the information up front. When they're in that meeting conversating, if they already know what they're doing, you're going to eliminate a lot of that conflict right off the bat just by giving them the information that they need and talking to them. As far as the citizens of Washington County, open door policy. If you guys have concerns, issues, whatever, if you need to talk to the county judge, say, I need to talk to the county judge, and come talk to him. If the road superintendent or any other manager can help you with your issues, then that's great. But if you feel like you need to come all the way to the county judge for those issues, then let's talk about it and let's overcome it. Thank you.
We'll start with you next, Mr. Ward, for the next question. You both spoke of population growth. What can the county and citizens do to welcome people of underrepresented groups?
Well, we have a website. The Washington County has a website, and maybe it's not used well enough, but there's a lot of information that can be had on that website, and maybe that's where we could start, is putting the information out there, letting people know what they can and can't, or what their facilities are, what there is to do. And I've thought about having a publicist, as maybe not on staff, but once a month, let's just put something out there to the people saying, hey, this is what we're doing in Washington County. This is what's coming up. This is our day-to-day operation of Washington County, and give the people an opportunity to witness that. Thank you.
Mr. Moody, same question for you. You both spoke of population growth. What can the county and citizens do to welcome people of underrepresented groups?
I'm glad Mr. Ward mentioned the website, because if you've been there, oh my goodness gracious, it's so clunky. I've been working that thing for years now, and it is not user friendly. So I agree that we should probably clean that up a little bit, make it a little bit more intuitive. We don't have to recreate the wheel. There's Canopy NWA here that welcomes refugees from around the world. We can partner with them. To his point, we could put on the website, this is how you get connected with them. We could be a clearinghouse for all the nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations that are working to help people in various ways. Because we are resource rich in Northwest Arkansas, but we're coordination poor. And sometimes that access is not reached by the people who need it most, or it's not accessed by people who need it most. And that's a problem. I think as county leadership, we can expand our reach by getting all those groups together. And that doesn't even have to cost the county much. It's just a little bit of time and effort. These people already know what they're doing. There are countless organizations who have been feeding people over the last couple of years, some before that, but it's expanded and doing a lot of great work. So we don't have to do the great work for them. One of the things I've actually considered is for some of the things I've talked about is offering county employees an opportunity to kind of get out in the county more. Obviously, certain staffs might not have the time or the freedom to do that if it's a 24/7 staffing situation, but allowing them time to go to do some outreach, to feel more involved with their community, not just in their role with the county, but as members of the county. My wife is a transplant from New York, so the way I welcomed her is I just reached out to her the day after she landed and say, "Hey, how's it going?" So that worked out pretty well. And I'm a lifelong Arkansan. Here in Arkansas, we still have that Southern hospitality. I think we can welcome people. It's rather than be afraid of change, rather than be afraid of people who are different than us. Let's embrace that difference. Let's embrace diversity. Let's learn from them. People from all over the world have so many life experiences. It's fascinating. I have a brother-in-law who's from Morocco. I have a brother-in-law who was born in Korea. It's fascinating to talk to people from all these different life experiences. I'm glad that I was born and raised here, but that doesn't mean this is the only place to be born and raised from. So let's welcome them with open arms rather than resist change. Change is the only thing that's inevitable. Thank you.
Mr. Moody, we'll start with you for the next question. Will you encourage the Quorum Court to expand public comment time?
As some of you might know, I've used public comment time more than once over the years. Yes, in a word, yes. I would at the very least limit restrictions of public comment time. And by that, I mean if you're going to have the time available, make sure that the access is given to all members of the public. I have been there and seen justices of the peace who are not members of the public being shut down mid-comment. I have seen members of the public walking towards the podium to speak, and then the meeting is adjourned because we don't have time for that. Oh, you weren't fast enough. And I think those were the exact words. Oh, you're not fast enough. The Quorum Court, the county judge, we're not the bosses of anybody. We are the public servants of the public. And so we need to invite the public into that. Because here's the thing. I'm not an expert on everything. In fact, some might argue I'm not an expert on anything, and that's fine. I think true leadership means that you get the experts in there that know what they're talking about and invite them into the fold. People, I mean, we're in a university area. There are lots of experts out there. There are nonprofits. There are servants and other iterations that are already doing the work and already know what they're talking about and have already served the people that, that we've mentioned, the underrepresented, the new to town, whatever. So public comment is not a pain. It's not a detriment to the meeting. I think it only enhances the meeting. Because at the end of the day, we are elected by the public, and if we don't listen to the public, we're not going to stay in office very long, and we're not going to be able to do the job we're supposed to be doing. I guarantee, if I'm elected as county judge, I will not spend the next 4 years trying to figure out how to get reelected. I will spend those 4 years trying to do the best I can to make sure that I'm serving the people of the county, whether they voted for me or not, because that's the job. At the end of the day, that's the job, and that's it. And that's what I vow to you tonight to do. Thank you.
Mr. Ward, same question. Will you encourage the Quorum Court to expand public comment time?
Yes, but I also believe that there does need to be a limit. Sometimes things get highly contentious and we get stuck. Within reason, I believe that is true. And a lot of times people come up and they have something to say, and I think the court has the authority to say, hey, look, we're going to give you some more time. This is positive. But sometimes the public comment deteriorates quickly. And, if it's interfering with the court, at some point you've got to call it. But as Josh said, we're here to represent the people, and we're here because of the people, and we need to give them every opportunity to speak. Thank you.
We'll start with you, Mr. Ward, for the next question. How will you separate your private business interests from the public government position?
Okay. I have started my own business, and I do dirt work and everything. I'm very small, and I intended to stay small, even if this county judge thing doesn't work out. I still intend to stay small. I have made arrangements if I am to be elected county judge. Another small business owner that does a similar work has said that he would take on my employees if I would allow him to use my equipment. So that could be a huge bridge to allowing somebody else to manage that for me. Thank you.
Same question, Mr. Moody. How will you separate your private business interests from the public government position?
At the end of this month, I'm going to be unemployed. As I mentioned, I'm a teacher. And I am not going to start a new contract next year because I don't want to have to break contract mid-year come January when I'm serving as county judge. One thing I will promise, though, because I do know a lot of people in the area, I've been here a long time, and I'm not going to use my role to do any personal favors for anybody. I'm the Washington County Judge of the people. I have a lot of friends, and family, and people I love and care for. I've had people joking about, will you get me out of a ticket? Obviously, as we both know, that's not part of the job. No, I have no desire to do that. As I mentioned before, I've dedicated my life to public service. I'm not in this to enrich myself. I'm not in this to win prestige or as a stepping stone to something quote-unquote higher. I think that those who know me well know that that would never become an issue. I guess that's all I can really say about that. Thank you.
We'll start with you, Mr. Moody, for the next question. Would you be open to the county hiring outside CPAs to audit every county department?
That's not something I'd considered before. I think that's an interesting idea. I think it's good to have oversight in one way or another, and if that means hiring outside people to make sure the books are on the up and up, I think that's definitely worth exploring. I'm hoping and planning and believing that we already have in place in most areas people that are attempting to keep the books on the up and up and willing to do so. And I'm hoping, and just, my initial reaction is make sure that the people are in place that are capable as well as trustworthy. If there becomes a concern that that's not the case, then yes, I would definitely be open and interested in getting people on a contract basis, I guess, from the outside to look in and make sure everything's copacetic. Thank you.
Same question, Mr. Ward. Would you be open to the county hiring outside CPAs to audit every county department?
Well, we currently have an audit, and every year they come in and they audit everything. Now, these auditors, they get a pile of everything, and nobody can catch all of it. Kind of like Josh had just mentioned, if we thought that there was something going on or there was something outside of line, I definitely believe that it's a good idea to get an outside source to do those investigations. Even as small as an incident, we shouldn't be investigating our own incidents. There's outside sources that can come in, and it keeps everybody honest, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question. And we'll start with you, Mr. Ward. Washington County has a listing of county judges who participate in community events and were always visible. Do you plan to do this? And if so, how?
I've thought about this a lot, is how am I going to interact with the public once we get there? I mean, I've seen county judges and they go to, they have meetings and meetings. You call up there and you're like, hey, I need to talk to the county judge. Well, we need to schedule a time for you because he has this meeting, and maybe he's even out of town or she's out of town or whatever. What my thoughts were is, again, with the website, let's just make a time, once a week, I'm going to be in this town or this area, available for questions, concerns, whatever it may be, and just be there. Maybe we can cook hamburgers or hot dogs or whatever to make it a kind of an event, similar to what the sheriff does for, his breakfasts, things like that. Just make myself available. Thank you.
Mr. Moody? Same question. Washington County has a listing of county judges who participate in community events and were always visible. Do you plan to do this? And if so, how?
I'm already doing it. I already have been doing it for years. Currently, I'm doing 2 full-time jobs. I'm teaching, I'm campaigning, and then I sleep. Teach, campaign, sleep. That's what I'm doing right now. After this month, I'll be campaigning. I'll be devoting my energy to campaigning. If and when I'm elected in January, I will continue to be reaching out to people. Maybe I won't go to multiple activities every day like I am now, but multiple activities every week for sure. And like we had both already mentioned, I plan to be out in the community and having regular opportunities for citizens to reach out and talk face-to-face about concerns. My favorite part of this whole process has been having those one-on-one conversations with people I would never have had the opportunity to speak with if I was sitting at home, relaxing. But yes, as it's a public service, yes, I will be out I will continue to be out in the public as I have been already. I will continue to advocate for people. And one of the things I will advocate for is I will be lobbying Arkansas to change the name of county judge. Because as many of you know, but many of you might not, county judge is not a judge. It's an executive role. In other states, it's manager, executive director, county mayor even in some places. As I tell people, it's mayor of the county. And I think the county judge is needlessly confusing to many Arkansas voters. Every other person I talk to asks, don't you have to be a lawyer to do that? And no, actually, you don't, as we can both attest to. So reaching out to people and talking to people from all walks of life is one of my great pleasures in life, and I will continue to do that.
And that concludes our question and answer portion. We'll now hear closing statements from the candidates. You each have 3 minutes for your closing statement, and we'll start first with you, Mr. Ward.
I decided to run for county judge because I thought I brought a unique perspective. Coming from the lowest paid employee to the road superintendent was a huge deal for me. I never even imagined it, honestly. When the opportunity came up to run for county judge, I thought, how awesome would it be to have a county judge that has been through every level. He's been directed by good managers, bad managers. He's been asked to do things that, maybe that manager wasn't willing to do his own self, or maybe so. But irregardless, you get to see what those employees have to go through. When that county judge makes a decision up there and he says, well, we're going to make this drastic change, or we're going to change this department, or we're going to promote this certain individual, well, that has an overflowing effect on every employee. And that goes back to where we're talking about morale and things like that. It has an overwhelming impact on their morale. And sometimes it's good. Most time, people don't take change very well. And that's the reason why the county has been basically stagnant, in my opinion. And every county judge that's been in there has done something amazing. They really have. Even the current administration, they've done great things since they've been in there. It's just from a different perspective for different people. You know, and it's hard for everybody to get on the same page. It's hard to say, I'm going to appeal to everybody, because no matter what we do, at some point we're going to stumble and we're going to have somebody aggravated with us because we've made a decision that's one way or the other. But that's our job. That's what we're supposed to be doing, and we're supposed to be looking out for the best interest of everybody. And sometimes you make a tough decision that doesn't appeal to everybody, but it appeals to most, or at least we'd like to hope so. And then I'll finish with the only way we can make positive change is if everybody's working together. And by working together, we've all got to listen, we've all got to compromise, and we all have to be willing to accept what comes out of that compromise. Thank you.
Mr. Moody, you have 3 minutes for your closing statement.
As I mentioned before, I'm a teacher with a business background. Raise your hand if you are a teacher or ever have been. If anybody wants to tell you you do not have supervisory experience, does that make sense to you? I supervise 28 people at a time that are going every which way and somehow manage controlled chaos. There are so many things that I want to mention that I haven't. I will briefly go back to the jail expansion conversation. There's a good chance if we use the American Rescue Plans to expand the jail, we're going to have to pay that back in tax dollars. We, the people, after the current administration and most of the Quorum Court are no longer in office. And there's been no discussion about how to pay for staffing and maintaining that expanded part of the jail. So in other words, it's going to continue to be a drain on our tax dollars, more so than it currently is. If we are being proactive and rehabilitative and serving all needs of the people of the county, or as many as possible, we have a golden opportunity right now, $50 million total dollars in federal COVID relief money. If we can be creative about using those to be proactive and creating productive tax-paying citizens rather than warehousing people, that's going to be a return on all of our investment. We're all going to see that money come back. We're all going to have better employees to work for our small businesses. We're all going to have better people working at all service industries, people working on our cars, all kinds of things. It's going to be better for all of us. You know, the rising tide raises all ships or boats or whatever the phrase is. I apologize. Right here, right now is the time. We're at a turning point on a local level, on a state level, on a national level. We're at a turning point. And we've been very divisive for the last few years on all levels. And we've been arguing, and we've been being hateful and name-calling. And we can continue to do that, and we can continue that divide. Or we can come together and start working together. Because, again, as I mentioned earlier, we're all in this together. This is it. This is Planet A. This is Plan A. We're all in this together. And the sooner we see that, the better we all are off. It's not us and them. It's not ours and these. It's we, the people. Period. Point blank. And I would love to lead Washington County in that direction, coming together, working together, and helping each other. And I'd be honored to have your vote this month in the Democratic primary for county judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our attendees for participating, and thank you to our viewers and attendees as well. Thank you to the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition and the League of Women Voters for being our host tonight. We're going to take a brief break while we switch over to the next set of candidates who will be the Washington County Prosecutors candidates. We will begin at 6:30, so please stay tuned.
Oh gosh. Yeah, you're all.
Oh, yes.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Decretia Prude, and I'll be your moderator this evening. I want to also thank the Fayetteville Public Library once again for allowing us to use this space, as well as the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition and the League of Women Voters for being our hosts. And lastly, thank you to the candidates for being here,
Thank you.
our attendees, and our viewers for your participation. Joining us today, we have the Washington County Prosecutor candidates, Stephen Koger and Matt Durrant. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to provide an opening statement. Following opening statements, each candidate will be asked a few prepared questions, followed by questions from the audience that will need to be written on cards and then passed to the attendants in the aisle. Candidates have a maximum of 3 minutes to answer each question. After questions, each candidate will have 3 minutes to provide a closing statement. And if there are no questions, we'll jump right in. We'll start with you, Mr. Koger, with your opening statement. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Stephen, and I was born and raised in Danville, Arkansas, before moving to Fayetteville on a Razorback Marching Band scholarship for the U of A. I graduated with honors and then worked at Legal Aid of Arkansas, and while there, received the Walton family's Héroes de Corazón, or Heart Heroes Award, for my advocacy serving victims there. I worked abroad as a Fulbright Scholar before attending the University of Washington Law on a full ride scholarship. I graduated, moved back to Arkansas to start a nonprofit serving survivors of sex trafficking and labor trafficking, mostly children. And over the last 7 years, I've grown that nonprofit from an annual revenue of just about $11,000 to over $1 million. I grew the staff from 1 to over 20, and I cultivated trusting relationships with the wealthiest families in Northwest Arkansas because my team and I achieved the goals and exceed the metrics that we agree upon. As an attorney, I have worked in federal courts in Arkansas, Louisiana, and Tennessee, and over a dozen circuit courts across our state, all in service to survivors. Most of my clients have been children and teens, and their suffering is the root of my motivation to run for chief prosecutor. Now, I have respect for Mr. Durrant, though I disagree with him. Please hold that in mind while I make comments about the many differences between us. The reality is that you need to make a decision, and it's a significant decision. It should be an informed decision, and if I were to say that his public record was off limits, then you would lack vital information. So, put succinctly, my platform will make us safer and save us money. We will treat kids like kids, reform cash bail, and we will address the root causes of crime and addiction. Now, what am I talking about when I say treat kids like kids? My opponent has charged 62 children as adults as young as 15 years of age. When I'm elected, that practice stops on day one because we're going to be a data-informed office, and there's no data that shows that children understand long-term consequences as their brain is still developing. We're not going to ask, what did this child do wrong, but we're going to ask, what can I do to support this child? So we'll treat kids like kids by not charging them as adults and by punishing people that abuse them and punishing mandated reporters who fail to report. Next, we're going to reform cash bail. Too often, I've seen violent people buy their way out of jail, leaving my clients in fear. And that's only part of the cost of cash bail. We spend $96 a day holding people in jail pretrial, and many of them pose no danger to anybody. Last week, we had well over 500 people in jail who could have gotten out if they'd had the money. And that's not an unusual number. And if you have 500 people times $100 a day, times 365 days, that adds up real quick. So we're going to reform cash bail and save at least $4 million net annually. Finally, we'll address the root causes of crime by treating addiction like the mental health issue that it is. This means institutionalizing a mental health court, addressing the intersections of jail and homelessness, and being a proactive prosecutor, not just reacting after a crime is committed. This is why on day one, I will submit budgets, position descriptions, and goals with metrics that y'all can hold me accountable on for the following 3 programs. Justice involves supportive housing, mental health court, and pretrial services. And if I'm not mistaken, that's probably close to my 3 minutes. If you'd like to know more about these programs, you can visit votecoger.com.
Mr. Durant, you have 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. I'd like to first say thank you to Quisha for being our moderator here. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition for hosting this, and for the Fayetteville Public Library for giving us this space to have this forum in. To briefly tell you about myself, I was born and raised in West Memphis, Arkansas. Graduated from West Memphis High School and came to school up here in the fall of '91 and pretty much never left. Fayetteville has been home for me since essentially the fall of '91. I got my graduate degree from the University of Arkansas. I got my law degree from the University of Arkansas. Then in September of 1998, I began working in the 4th Judicial District Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And I remember on the day that I got hired, there was an attorney who had given me a recommendation for the job, and he pulled me aside and said, "Good job, kid. Now go work you a few years there and get you some experience and then go out and get a real job." Well, what I learned is over those 3 years is I didn't want to get a quote unquote real job because I had one. And I found a passion in what I do in that office. And there's a passion for helping people. There's a passion for holding people accountable. But the one thing that I believe that motivates me every day, and what I tell my deputies every day that differentiates us between other lawyers, is that our sole job when we get up in the morning and walk into our office is to do the right thing. That keeps us going. We're facing a lot of issues right now. COVID backlog. There are thousands of open cases. Our deputies are overwhelmed. The public defenders are overwhelmed. We're trying to work through the backlog of having been shut down for over a year and a half. We've got jail issues, not just here in Washington County, but also Madison County that have to be addressed. I have a record. I'm running on my experience, and as Mr. Coger said, you know, it's fair game. It is fair game. You know, over those 23 years, I haven't been perfect. Nobody's perfect over the course of 23 years. But there is a much more good than bad. So when you talk about who you're going to vote for and who you want in that office, you also don't just talk about what you're going to do, you talk about what you've done. You've got to look at the record. What have you done over the course of your history? What are you going to do? And when it comes to what are you going to do, you're going to have to ask the big question of how. Not just generalizations, but specifics. Ask for specifics of how are you going to accomplish what you promised to accomplish. How are you going to do what you say you're going to do? I've had to answer for my mistakes, and I willingly do. So questions need to be asked about how promises are going to be kept that have been made. Thank you.
We'll now start the question and answer portion. We'll start first with Mr. Durant with the first question. What is the biggest challenge facing the prosecutor's office, and how do you plan to address it?
I think I just kind of addressed what I consider the 2 biggest problems. One is the COVID backlog that we're trying to fight our way through. Fortunately, the legislature came through with part-time positions to help us get to those COVID, those positions, or those cases that were filed during COVID. They gave $1 million to us, and they gave $1 million to the Public Defender Commission. So each of us got positions, each of our offices got positions, and so we're working well together to fight that backlog, because that's one of the things that you learn over the course of of a career, and that's one thing that comes with a lot of time in a particular career, is you build relationships. You have to work well with other people. You have to work well with people on the other side, because at the end of the day, this is an adversarial system. That doesn't mean that we're adversaries with those people who are representing criminal defendants. You have to work well together. That's one thing that we're doing, is we're working with the public defenders to try to get through that backlog. The other, obviously, is the jail situation. As we speak, there's no room at the jail, and if nothing changes, then we're going to have to expand. That's why, as part of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee, we're looking into those things. Mr. Coger and I, we agree on several things. The need for a mental health court, the need for pretrial services, the need for more funding for drug court. I'm a firm believer in drug court. Right now, drug court's maxed out. It needs more funding. Doesn't have enough funding to handle more defendants coming in, because the more people that come in, then the more thinner the services get spread. So you've got to make sure they've got enough funding. So we need to work, and which is what we're doing with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee, trying to come up with a list of pretrial services, trying to looking for grants to find funding for a mental health court, working with the judges to determine who's going to run the mental health court. There are a number of ways that we are currently looking at trying to fix that backlog and the overcrowding at the jail, because at the end of the day, you just can't let people out. We did that in COVID. During COVID, we released a bunch of nonviolent offenders, and the issue that we had was an explosion in failures to appear, which further clogs the system. So we've got to find a way that we can release people to make sure that they're going to show up for court and not reoffend.
Same question for you, Mr. Coger. What is the biggest challenge facing the prosecutor's office, and how do you plan to address it?
The biggest challenge at the moment is misplaced priorities. My opponent will go so hard on a recreational drug user and then miss a vital deadline and violate the Speedy Trial Act like he did in the case of the Walker Park murder. We have to know what's important. We have to focus on what's important. It doesn't matter to me that an 18-year-old is smoking a joint. I'm not interested in that. We have such vital things that we need to be focused on. And as I said, I've been serving survivors for 7 years, and they are my priority. So I think it's important that we have leadership in the office that knows what's most important. This is one of the reasons my office is going to be dropping cannabis, simple possession of cannabis charges. We've got only 20 deputy prosecutors, and as Mr. Durrett said, that's not enough, right? We have to be selective about those charges that we bring, and we have to focus our limited resources on addressing violent crime and crimes against property. I've spent a lot of time now in Madison County at Granny's and at the Assembly of God, and we were both there actually last weekend. But I hear so much people tired of the constant, just revolving door, right? As my opponent said, the jail is at capacity, and people in Madison County are telling me, well, I'm tired of the person trying to steal the copper from my air conditioner to fund their habit. And we've got to prioritize not just violent crime, but crimes against property as well, because as happened not too long ago, people in Madison County are about to start taking stuff into their own hands. So we have to start making sure that there are consequences for folks, and that folks are taken out of that community at least for a while they can work on stuff. The other thought I have as regards to the biggest challenge or the biggest priorities for the prosecutor's office is what's related to what I already said, the management of these priorities and the management of staff. There's 20 deputy prosecutors, 20-ish. And as my opponent said, we may have some more coming part-time with some of this COVID funding. And they're a skillful bunch, they're an experienced bunch. I'm really excited to work with them when I'm elected. Brian Lamb is amazing. I'll really look forward to working with folks and providing clarity and guidance on what our priorities are. Right now, you may have one prosecutor that sends almost nobody to drug court. And then you've got one prosecutor that's got a smarter view and will send more. Anyway, I'm going to provide clear guidance.
Mr. Koger, we'll start with you for the second question. In recent months, 400 individuals were in the local jail on pretrial detention, meaning they're presumed innocent, accused of a crime, but not convicted. Are there any methods you support to safely reduce the number of individuals sitting in jail awaiting their day in court?
Yeah. So, constitutional law, right? You learn real quick that in this country you're supposed to be innocent until you're proven guilty. Innocent until proven guilty. So, we've got folks sitting in the Washington County Jail, not been found guilty of anything. Plenty of them posing no danger to anybody. If we say we've got 700 people in the jail, let's say we've got 80% of them held pretrial, and usually it's a little over 80%. Let's say a quarter of that 80%, 140-ish people, could be safely released. That's 140 people that we're not spending $100 a day on. 140 times 100 times 365 days. How much good could we do? How much good could we do for kids at J.O. Kelly Middle School? How much good could we do for this community if we saved that money instead of wasting it on people who are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty? You know, a couple weeks ago I visited with the Douglas County Pretrial Services Agency. They're out of Kansas. And they've done such amazing, amazing work. They've got equations, rubrics to determine if someone is a safety hazard or if it's safe to release them. And it's not just a question of releasing people or not, right? You can release people and the prosecutor gets to make recommendations, right? My office will get to say, well, you know, we're gonna release you, but you're gonna have to call and check in a couple times a week or whatever. So there's not just this some sort of dichotomy between you stay or you go. There's middle grounds. There's pretrial services, right? Let's talk about it. So when I talk about reforming cash bail, talk about holding folks that are dangerous, talk about releasing folks that are not dangerous. Pretrial services is how we reform cash bail. And my opponent now says he supports this, but I have seen nothing until he was up for re-election about him supporting it. So that's important to hold in mind where our motivations come from. My motivation is real and pre-existing, all right? Pretrial services means that we have someone whose job it is to run these evaluations of folks being held in Washington County Jail. And then we've got other folks whose job it is to say, okay, Larry, now you've got court next week. You need to show up for that. Do you have a ride? How are we going to get you there? So we've got support. We've got a data analyst to say, how are we doing with failures to appear? Are people missing court? And they're going to be reporting back to me, and they're going to be reporting back to the Quorum court on the success of this. So yeah, there's all sorts of stuff we can do for pretrial services.
Mr. Durant, same question. In recent months, 400 individuals were in the local jail on pretrial detention, meaning they're presumed innocent, accused of a crime, but not convicted. Are there any methods you support to safely reduce the number of individuals sitting in jail waiting for their day in court?
Well, what we're currently doing, what the Sheriff's Office is currently doing, that I'm working with them, with the Sheriff's Office, and in conjunction with the circuit judges, is the ankle monitoring program. Is they are identifying individuals who can safely be released but have failed to appear for trial or a previous court date, and they're putting them on a monitoring system so that they can be released on their own recognizance. Keep in mind, judges set bonds, And as part of the criminal justice assessment, one recommendation that they had was that the communications on bonds between the prosecuting attorney and the judges stop. So unless we are filing an affidavit for an arrest warrant, our office gets no input on bonds being set. The judge does not ask us what our input is on bonds. So we have been cut out of that equation. But nevertheless, I have been working with the judges and with the sheriff's office. We first started releasing those individuals, as I said earlier, during COVID, to get the numbers down. That was somewhat of a success, but also it came with a large number of failures to appear. That's when they came up with the monitoring system. So individuals who, as I said, have failed to appear on nonviolent offenses can be released if they meet criteria set by the sheriff's office. As it pertains to the pretrial services, Mr. Coger has not been paying attention, obviously, to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee meetings because we have been discussing pretrial services, and specifically, I have been advocating for pretrial services for a very long time, much longer than he has been an announced candidate for this office. So for him to say that I'm only doing it when I'm up for re-election, it's not truthful. Pretrial services are something that I have advocated for, I have brought up, and I think they could be helpful. But at the end of the day, we've got to figure out who is in jail. And it's not just people who are in on a drug charge and they can't afford a $1,500 bond. These are violent criminals. These are people who have failed to appear on violent crimes. We are running out of individuals that we can safely release from jail. And so we've got to find other ways to release people if we can. That is a big problem. And that's one we're trying to face head on. But the fact remains is that you can't just go through and wholesalely release everybody, 200, 300, 400 people from jail because on most of those people, a bond has already been set. Now, if you want to go talk to a judge and say, hey, I want to release this person, OR, then you can do that. But a bond has been set by a judge and you can't override that. So we have to look for different ways.
Thank you. Mr. Durant, you'll take the next question first. What do you think is the most effective way to deal with low-level drug offenders? What would your office policies be regarding plea bargaining in drug offense cases?
Low-level drug offenders should always be given the opportunity at treatment first. I believe every offender should be held accountable, but there are a number of different forms of accountability. Low-level drug offenders should be given an option of drug court first, and if they don't want drug court, they should be offered probation with drug treatment. That's exactly what we're doing. And quite frankly, not everybody wants drug court. We can't force them into drug court. I guess we could offer drug court or trial, but we look for treatment first. It's always been my belief that this community is better served when it comes to low-level drug offenders when you get that person off of drugs, when you get them out of the cycle of addiction, when you get them working, gainfully employed, you get them supporting their family, they're paying taxes back in their society, they're contributing back to society. I believe that those individuals and society benefits a lot more when we can have those people reformed and being a contributing member to society as opposed to paying for their incarceration. When it comes to the marijuana offenses, as was brought up, I took an oath of office and I swore to uphold the constitutions of the state of Arkansas and the United States of America. And within those documents is a separation of powers. It's not my prerogative to ignore laws that I don't like. If there's a law that I don't like that's still constitutional, I'm obliged to enforce it. Now, prosecutors are given a lot of discretion. They have wide discretion. We exercise our discretion on the back end when it comes to disposition of offenders. And as it comes to dropping simple marijuana cases, we're not going to do that. We've got a misdemeanor prosecutor who handles those. They don't result in jail time. They rarely result in a drug conviction. There's often there's treatment for those individuals, but our office doesn't handle many of those except for those out in the county. Cities are done by individual city prosecutors. Now, if I wanted to, there's a provision in the law that would allow me to take away their authority to prosecute misdemeanor offenses or state offenses, because technically they prosecute those charges under my name. I'm not going to do that. Those are either duly elected officials or are appointed by duly elected officials. And it's not my place to tell them how to run their cities. Thank you.
Same question for you, Mr. Koger. What do you think is the most effective way to deal with low-level drug offenders? And what would your office policies be regarding plea bargaining in drug offense cases?
Great question. This is, when we talk about treating kids like kids, maybe another side, another aspect of this jewel is understanding adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and having a high ACEs score, and how ACEs contribute to things like, well, the already impaired ability of adolescents to understand the long-term consequences of their choices. And, I feel as though my opponent is making light of what his office does when it comes to low-level drug offenders. When young people, I don't want young people to smoke. I don't want young people to do any drug. I think until their brain is done gelling at the age of 25, it's probably best to just have water with lime in it and get your exercise to stay relaxed. That said, right now, under the leadership of my opponent, plea bargains vary widely. As I said earlier, you may get one prosecutor. It's like there's 20 different offices in his office, because you may get one prosecutor that'll send somebody to drug court, and you may get another that would offer you a much harsher deal. I have a friend, several, who have encountered my opponent's office for marijuana usage, and this he mentioned the first thing that comes up is drug court. Judge Beaumont is busy. She's got 25% of her stuff isn't even drug court. I think she's got some family stuff too or something. It's not drug court. It needs to be just drug court. But anyway, when we put somebody in there who's a recreational cannabis user, that's a waste of space. That's a waste of space for somebody that could be getting treatment, that could be getting healing, and that needs the accountability that drug court can offer. When I was gathering signatures to get on the ballot, it was a lot of work. I got over 2,800 signatures. Of course, my opponent, he just paid that filing fee, but I digress. I was visiting with somebody who was considering whether they were going to sign my petition or not. She said, well, what differentiates you from the opponent? I said, well, I'm not going to put people in jail for marijuana. I'm not going to threaten them with jail. I'm not going to threaten them with drug court. She said, well, Stephen, they broke the law. And I said, yeah, they can clean the creek. They can go clean Gully Park's creek, because we're not going to waste our time, our limited prosecutorial resources, and miss another Speedy Trial Act clock because we're focused on the wrong things. Yeah. I guess that's my answer.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mr. Koger, for the next question. It is said by lawyers themselves that one constitutional right denied poor American citizens is the right to trial by jury. What will you do to stop folks being forced to plea out and be denied justice because they are poor?
Please, PL, not please, as in please do a thing for me, but please, plea agreements, plea offers need to be proportional, right, to the crime that's been caused. there's a really good publication by former U.S. Senator from Arkansas, Tim Hutchinson, Republican. He recently published it and really blasted Clinton and Biden's really harsh stances and changes to the criminal justice system. And he's right. One of the things he said was we need to make sure that when we dole out punishments, that they don't cost us more than what the crime cost us. And I think there's some wisdom in that. I don't agree with Tim Hutchinson on a lot of stuff, but we agree on that. We've got some prosecutors in the prosecutor's office that I'm sure I'll have no trouble working with, and others who go real hard on these plea offers and make a terrible plea offer, just really cruel. And I think one of the things that we can do to make sure that people aren't just accepting a plea deal to get out of jail because they're tired of sitting in there waiting on trial is, well, it's a combination of things. In this Venn diagram, we should have reasonable plea offers. We should have pretrial services. So it's, you know, as my opponent, I'm sure, would agree, these are complex questions with complex answers. But there's got to be some proportionality to the harm caused in the plea deal that's offered. And, yeah.
Mr. Durant, same question. It is said by lawyers themselves that one constitutional right denied to poor American citizens is the right to trial by a jury. What will you do to stop folks being forced to plea out and be denied justice because they're poor?
One thing I'm proudest of in this campaign is not only my support by several law enforcement organizations, but also by so many criminal defense lawyers. Because law enforcement sees how I treat crime, and the criminal defense attorneys see how I treat those who are accused of crime. My policy has always been for our office to be open, honest, and fair. At the end of the day, when we make a plea offer, you know, that person, that defendant who's charged with a crime, I've heard the term of the coercive plea bargaining. Well, that defendant, keep in mind, has an attorney. And that attorney is advising him or her whether or not to take that plea offer. And so if it's excessively harsh, then that lawyer is going to say, you know, a jury's not going to do this to you. You're going to do much better in front of a jury. I'm a big fan of a robust public defender system, because I believe that our system works best when you have fantastic lawyers defending even those who are accused of the most horrendous crimes, because that helps prosecutors sleep better at night knowing that our convictions are good, that the defendants that we convict have been well represented. So I think that we need to have a well-funded public defender system. But at the end of the day, when it comes to plea bargains, defendants aren't scared of me. Defendants aren't scared of my deputies. When they enter a plea, it's because they are afraid that a jury of their peers is going to judge them more harshly than the offer that we've made. So it's not just the prosecutor making a plea offer, and that's it. It goes through a defense attorney, whether it be a public defender or some who's privately retained. They consult with their client. They go over all the evidence with their client. They go over the pros and cons with their client. These are experienced defense attorneys. They know what juries do in similar situations. And then it goes in front of a judge. And judges have rejected plea offers because they're too harsh or too light. So it's all multiple different parts working together as part of the plea system. So my big answer to this is to make sure that there are adequately funded public defenders, because not everybody can afford a lawyer, and everybody who's charged with a crime needs one.
Mr. Durant, we'll start with you for the next question. I'm a U of A student and sexual assault survivor. I've been looking into your records. There are many reported sexual violence incidents and rapes at the U of A that never go to trial. As prosecutor, or in your role as prosecutor, how would you treat survivors and perpetrators of sexual violence? And how would you address sexual violence on the U of A campus?
Sexual violence on any college campus is, that is one of the biggest issues that we face in our office. And not in terms of numbers, but any type of sex offense. And dealing with victims is something that we try to make it a priority in our office, because victims, whether or not we can file a case, victims deserve to be treated with respect. Victims deserve to be listened to. Victims deserve the time of day. I mean, that's a bare minimum. And so the victims deserve our very best. And we work these cases. We treat them like any other sex offense case. We go through, we determine how much evidence there is, whether or not we can file a charge. If we can file a charge, we do. If we can't, then we don't. And that is probably the most difficult conversation that a prosecutor can have. That's probably the worst part of the job, is sitting down with a victim and a victim's family and explaining to that victim that we don't have enough evidence to go forward. Because the immediate thought is, well, don't you believe me? And the answer is yes, but we don't always have enough evidence to go forward. Those are very, very difficult cases, not just college cases. Sex assault cases are very difficult from a number of reasons. We've got to eliminate the stigma of victimization, of being a victim, because lots of times victims are afraid to come forward. Victims are afraid that they're going to be looked at differently, and it's not their fault. We need to make sure that victims are treated like they are. They're normal people, they're regular people, and too often they get this feeling that people are going to look at me differently, people are going to treat me differently, my friends aren't going to want to hang out with me, my friends are going to act differently around me. That's got to stop. We do our best. We give as much attention as we can to those cases, because those are cases of individuals who are broken, and we owe it to them to give them our best effort, to work through those cases the best we can, and if we can provide justice, to provide justice to the fullest extent.
Mr. Coker, same question for you. I'm a U of A student and sexual assault survivor. There are many reported sexual violence incidents and rapes at the U of A that never go to trial. As prosecutor, or in your role as prosecutor, how would you treat survivors and perpetrators of sexual violence, and how would you address sexual violence on the U of A campus?
Centering the victims, the survivors' needs and voice is so important. There's some really good research coming from around the country that talks about restorative justice programs for young people, for survivors of rape and other sexual violence. And several of my friends who have survived rape or other sexual violence talk about, well, they don't want a trial. They want an opportunity to confront the abuser, the rapist, and to have that person be held accountable publicly in a different way. That is something that I'm interested in, these sort of restorative justice ideas. There's some really good information coming out of DC. There's a program that shows that 90% of juveniles, when given the opportunity for restorative justice, those juveniles that participate in restorative justice are 90% less likely to be a part of the whole recidivism problem. I got a call maybe a couple months ago now from the mother of a young woman who was raped on campus last year. And she expressed her consternation that in this case they wanted to go to trial, but they were told that it would just be a he said, she said situation. And I feel like that's just about every crime ever, the he said, she said situation. Some of y'all may have been watching the issue in Huntsville recently. In the junior high locker rooms there, kids were being sexually abused. And for a while, at least, my opponent was saying that because he couldn't prove that the abusers were gratified by the abuse, that there was no chance to bring charges. Well, the prosecutor has to be willing to take that risk and fight for the victim. It's really a question for the jury to decide at that point. The prosecutor shouldn't be the gatekeeper that says, well, you don't get to go to trial because I don't think we'll win. It's really vital that we listen to the victim and the survivor. What do they want out of this? And I'm the kind of person that will work with community organizations, work with victims, work with survivors to create a restorative justice program so that it's an option should the victim want that.
We'll go with you first, Mr. Koger, for the next question. How much criminal jury trial experience have you had in your law career, and what types of cases do you handle on a day-to-day basis?
Fantastic question. Absolutely zero jury trial experience. And when you're hiring a CEO of a hospital, you don't say, no, how many heart surgeries have you done? You look and see, can they manage people? Can they manage people? Can they provide clear direction? And that's what I'll do. I'll provide that clear direction. To jump around a little bit, I will talk a little bit about what kind of cases I currently handle. In 2007, George W. Bush passed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And it's actually super duper important for lots of survivors of trafficking. Now, most of my clients who've been trafficked have been trafficked by a father. Dad may say to them, hey, daughter in Guatemala, come, you're gonna get a great soccer scholarship, and you're gonna have a great life. And daughter comes, of course doesn't speak the language, turns herself in to the Customs and Border Protection agent, is then handed over from CBP to the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And the Office of Refugee Resettlement gets that kid to her father, who then will traffic her, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking. And so my job is to use the Immigrant Children's Health Improvement Act along with the Trafficking Victims Protection Act to create Medicaid eligibility for these survivors, to stop their deportation proceedings, and to get them on a path to citizenship. But back to that question of experience, I think it's such a good question. And I've been in front of, a jury as a decision maker. I've been in front of decision makers who were judges. I've been in front of decision makers who were asylum officers, all in support and centering the voices of victims. So when we need somebody with more experience in handling domestic violence cases in front of a jury, then I'll hire them. And when we need somebody who's experienced with fraud and theft, we'll hire them. I don't think it's wise for the elected prosecutor to be so down in the weeds, I think that is how, when it becomes about handling those cases as the chief prosecutor, that's how you miss that Speedy Trial Act. You know, there was a child, alleged child rapist, had been raping a 10 and 11-year-old for multiple years before they finally had the courage to report it to the school. And my opponent just missed the deadline, forgot to file the paperwork on time. And so that guy got to walk. So we've got to talk about the kind of experience we want to have.
Same question for you, Mr. Durant. How much criminal jury trial experience have you had in your law career? And what types of cases do you handle on a day-to-day basis?
I've been trying jury trials. I've been doing criminal law my entire career, 23 years. I've been trying jury trials that entire time, ranging from theft of property to capital murder, death penalty cases. Roughly in the neighborhood of 80, I guess. I don't know. My predecessor kept track of every single trial he had, and still does as a judge, and I don't do that. I've always felt that, and each of, not just my predecessor, but every predecessor before me, has viewed this job for what it is. It's not a figurehead. You have to lead by example. I'm not going to ask my hardworking folks to go and do something that I'm not willing to do. I'm not going to walk in their office with the 20 homicide cases, or now 21 since as of yesterday, that will be in my office that I'm going to be handling personally. I'm not going to walk into their office and say, hey, I know you're overburdened already, but why don't you take this murder case so I can administer? The hospital thing is a good analogy because, you know, if you needed bypass surgery, are you going to go to the cardiovascular surgeon who's been performing those procedures for 23 years? Or are you going to go, you know, to a dermatologist? Both of them are doctors. Both of them provide a very, very valuable service. But one has experience doing something and the other has never cracked a chest. I don't view trying cases as getting down in the weeds. I think that the people, the citizens of this community should and do expect to see their prosecuting attorney in a courtroom, because you're an attorney first and you are an administrator second. And I'm happy to take criticism for what happens in my office, but Mr. Koger, when he criticizes me, it's fair to say his office has had some cases where that were dismissed from speedy trial. They weren't mine, but I didn't do them personally. They're mine, though, because they're my office, because I take responsibility for everything that happens in my office. But to make it look worse on me, it's he forgot to file paperwork in time, which is not correct. None of these cases involve failure to file paperwork in time. They're complex issues, but nevertheless, it's my office. I take responsibility for it. I took responsibility for it then. I take responsibility for it now. I'll take responsibility for it till the day I die.
Final question. We'll start with you, Mr. Durant. What is the greatest mistake of your professional career?
Ooh, man, I going to law school.
I agree.
Yeah, well, if I can just have a quick aside here. I'm a third-generation lawyer, and my dad didn't want me to go to law school. He wanted me to go to medical school, but I spent too much time around him. But in any event, I don't know. I mean, the biggest mistake. I mean, I hate to hesitate because that means that it sounds like I'm going through tons of mistakes, but I mean, I think that any person who's been doing anything for any significant amount of time will tell you that they've made mistakes. There's no perfect person out there. I have, you know, I think that I do take responsibility for those cases that got dismissed. There was a man named Anthony Dell Jackson that was murdered in Walker Park. And we had a prosecutor who got mixed up on who was taking the time, speedy trial time, so to speak. Thought the defense was taking it, wasn't keeping accurate data on that. We let a family down, and looking in the eyes of a family and saying, we messed up and we can't get justice for your son, we can't get justice for your family. That's a terrible thing to do, because with as bad as you're feeling, that's not even close to what that victim's family's going through. I wish that, there are lots of things you go back over your career and wish you could do better. And if anyone thinks that they get everything right the first time, I'm not sure I would trust that person. I think there's something to be said for owning up to mistakes, being willing to go back and try to correct them. But it's the cases where we go to trial. You do the best you can. It's not a mistake, but you don't get the verdict that you wanted. You may get a guilty verdict, but it's not as much time, or you may get a not guilty. And you go back in your mind and you think, what could I have done better? You've got to go back and think of the things you could do better. I'm not going to say I'm glad I make mistakes. I have made many, but mistakes are how you learn. Mistakes are how you become a better person. And I hope that, because of those mistakes, that I can be a better person.
Same question for you, Mr. Koger. What is the greatest mistake of your professional career?
So, young asylum seeker, teenage girl. Lots of adverse childhood experiences. And if y'all haven't studied ACEs, there's some super cool stuff on the CDC website that'll just break your heart, but also inform you. And, she, asylum seeker, like I said, self-medicated a lot, just risk-seeking behavior, as any adolescent that's unable to comprehend the long-term consequences of their actions might do, but exaggerated because of the ACEs. And first she was stealing stuff, and I said, hey, look, I get it, you've got friends, but your friends were born here, and you've got to, you got to have new friends. You can't try to impress these people anymore. And being, a rebellious teen, I was disregarded. And then she's caught in Oklahoma in possession of drugs. Again, just poor decision on top of poor decision on top of poor decision. And she came back to me, and I said, I can't represent you anymore because you've now got a whole different case. You need to talk with somebody who's specialized in something called crimmigration, which is a whole different bailiwick. And the way that I transmitted that information just wasn't skillful enough, I don't think. I should have had one of my social work team members in there because she went into just a real bad mental health episode. And it's hard and it's sad. And like Mr. Durrett said, there's things that we'll have to live with and die with, and it's hard. And so That's probably my biggest, painfulest mistake so far, was not having somebody there who's trained in having these difficult conversations. Yeah.
Thank you. This concludes the question and answer portion of the forum. We'll now move on to closing statements, and each candidate will have 3 minutes for a closing statement, starting with Mr. Durant.
Once again, DeQuisha, I want to thank you for being our moderator. You've done a fantastic job, and once again, thanks to everybody for showing up. Thanks to the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition and to the League of Women Voters for hosting us today. This is an important vote. This is an important election. And I have on my signs, it says experience matters, because I believe it does. Because in this office, in this type of work, you can't just pass it off to other people. You can't just expect others to do the hard work. You've got to get in there. You've got to roll up your sleeves. You've got to fight for the people of Washington and Madison counties. And as Mr. Coger said in his opening about, my public record is fair game, it is. We've talked about it here tonight. Not everybody's perfect. I'm certainly one of those people that is not. And so you learn from your mistakes, and that's how you get better. That's what experience teaches you. Experience teaches you lots of things, but experience builds partnerships. Over the course of 23 years, I have cultivated partnerships that are going to help move this system and move it forward. I've made partnerships with judges, with law enforcement, with defense attorneys. We enjoy a very good relationship with the Public Defender's Office because we are fair, we are open, and we are honest. That is what we do. That is what we'll always do. One thing I'm not going to stop doing, one thing I am going to keep doing, I guess I should say, is there was criticism about me charging juveniles as adults 62 times. So that's roughly 9 times a year, give or take. Keep in mind, these aren't people who are smoking marijuana. These aren't people who are shoplifting from Walmart. These are people who are shooting and paralyzing people. These are people who are shooting up other people's homes, causing terror in our community. And each one of those cases, each one of those times that we made a petition to have a case, a juvenile case heard in adult court, that goes in front of a judge. And a judge makes the determination based on the law as to whether or not we've made the right decision. And so those 62 times, a judge has agreed with our decision to treat those people as adults because they've acted like adults and because they've harmed people. I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to do lots of things. I'm going to continue to get up every single day and with the sole purpose of doing the right thing for all the citizens of Washington and Madison County. So I would appreciate your vote. Thank you very much.
Mr. Coger, you have 3 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. What we need is someone with real imagination, not just out in the stars, but with a focused capacity to prepare budgets, actually implement the changes we need. My opponents had 8 years to do this criminal justice reform work, but only recently got inspired. Listening to the KUAF interview today, you wouldn't know which one of us was the reform candidate. But to vote for my opponent is to serve the status quo. The leadership here should be demanding that drug court triple in size, should be demanding a mental health court, should have already proposed budgets for all these things they allegedly support, should be demanding the reform of cash bail, should have started 8 years ago. None of that's happened, not a bit of it. He's had 8 years to submit these proposals. He's had 2 years, nearly, since the criminal justice assessment recommended pretrial services, but only recently asked for funding to the Quorum court last month. He had no plan, no data, no budget, no position descriptions, and later that week I submitted all those things to show that we would save a net $4 million annually. But this isn't just about reform, this is about prosecuting cases. My number one priority is public safety through fighting violent crime. We have an obligation on day one to make sure that it never happens again that a child rapist suspect gets off scot-free because paperwork doesn't get filed on time. That's not the experience we want to have. If experience matters, it's not the one we want to be having. We got to have good management. We got to have good leadership. We got to have good case management software. The violation of the Speedy Trial Act borders on inexcusable if it happens once. It violates standards of professional conduct if it just happened once. But it also happened in a DWI. It's happened in a capital murder, as my opponent mentioned. How many times do we have to have suspected rapists and murderers and other dangerous folks who the cops work hard to get go free? There was a case, y'all may remember the guy that was wearing a Nazi mask while filling up his big truck at Lafayette and College. He attacked multiple cops in Springdale and injured them. And my opponent dropped all the charges. Now, fortunately, one of those misdemeanors was taken up by the district court prosecutor in Springdale, and so there was some consequence. But we've got to make sure that this discretion is used well. You know, he said there's a lot of discretion. There is a lot of discretion. I'm going to use that discretion to drop marijuana charges, and I'm going to not use it so that I prosecute the heck out of people that hurt cops or hurt anybody. If you want a different experience, if you want a better experience, then you need to vote for someone that has a new and different experience. The proof is in the pudding, and I have seen no proof. To expect the same thing after doing the same thing, to expect a new result after doing the same thing is not logical. I would like to serve our neighbors experiencing homelessness by setting up something called Justice-Involved Supportive Housing. This is a fantastic stuff. It's been proven to work all throughout the South. There's ways that we can uplift people and end the revolving door. But anyway, you'll have to read about it on my website. Thank you for keeping the time. See y'all. Thank you.
That concludes the candidate forum hosted by the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition and the League of Women Voters. Thank you to our participants for attending, and thank you to our viewers for participating as well. Early voting begins May 9th with Election Day on May 24th. To check your voter status, go to voterview.org. That's VOTERVIEW.org. Have a good night.